Lesson 10. Active and Passive Voice. Icebreaker. The active voice and the passive voice are two different ways of structuring sentences in English. When the subject performs the action indicated by the verb actively, the sentence is said to be in the active voice. When the subject performs the action indicated by the verb passively, the sentence is said to be in the passive voice. Active voice. In the active voice, the object receives the action of the verb. It is the most often used way of speaking and writing. Sentences in active voice. Subject, verb, object. Salil plays cricket. Shipra wrote a letter. I will do this work. Passive voice. In the passive voice, the subject receives the action of the verb. It is not normally used in conversation or writing. However, it is considered more appropriate when the doer of the action is not relevant. It is often used in scientific and technical writing. Sentences in passive voice. Subject, verb, object. Cricket is played plus by Salil. A letter was written plus by Shipra. This work will be done plus by me. It is obvious, therefore, that the object of a sentence in the active voice becomes the subject of that sentence in the passive voice. Tips on conversion of sentences from active voice to passive voice. Converting a sentence from the active to the passive voice involves changing the sentence structure so that the object of the action becomes the subject of the sentence and the doer of the action either moves to the end of the sentence or is omitted altogether. Here are the rules and steps to follow when converting sentences from the active to the passive voice. Identify the subject, the verb, and the object in the sentence. The subject is the doer of the action. The verb is the action itself, and the object is the receiver of the action. Move the object to the beginning of the sentence while writing it in the passive voice. This object will become the new subject. The subject of the active voice sentence becomes the agent, the doer of the action, in the passive voice, but you may choose to omit it in passive constructions. Replace the active verb with one of the forms of the verb be. Is, am, are, was, were, has been, had been, will be, according to the tense of the original active verb. Use the past participle form of the main verb. If you want to specify the agent, the doer of the action, you can include it at the end of the passive sentence, preceded by the word by. Adjust pronouns he, she, it, they as needed to match the new subject in the passive voice. Ensure that the tense of the verb, past, present, or future, in the passive voice corresponds to the original tense of the verb in the active voice. Read the passive sentence to ensure it makes sense and retains clarity. The passive voice should only be used when it enhances the message or shifts the emphasis. Conjugation of verbs in passive voice. In grammar, the term conjugation means a change in the form of a verb to express its tense, person, etc. You can form the passive voice in any tense through conjugation. Conjugation of verbs in passive tense is easy, as the main verb is always in the past participle form and the auxiliary verb is always a be verb. To form the required tense, you need to conjugate the auxiliary verb. Look at the following table to understand this. Simple present. A mango is eaten by him. Present continuous. A mango is being eaten by him. Present perfect. A mango has been eaten by him. Look at the table below to see the forms of the active voice and the passive voice for various tenses. Notice how the subject and the object of a sentence change positions in the sentence. Tense, active voice, passive voice. Simple present. He drives a white cab. A white cab is driven by him. Simple past. He drove a white cab. A white cab was driven by him. Simple future. He will drive a white cab. A white cab will be driven by him. Present continuous. He is driving a white cab. A white cab is being driven by him. Past continuous. He was driving a white cab. A white cab was being driven by him. Present perfect. He has driven a white cab. A white cab has been driven by him. Past perfect. He had driven a white cab. A white cab had been driven by him. Future perfect. He will have driven a white cab. A white cab will have been driven by him. Rules for conversion of imperative sentences from active voice to passive voice. In imperative sentences, the subject you is not explicitly stated. If you want to include the subject in the passive voice, you can use let or you are to indicate the subject. Convert the active verb in the imperative sentence to a passive form. Use the appropriate form of the be verb is, are, am, followed by the past participle of the verb. You can add by followed by the agent, the doer of the action, if you want to specify the doer of the action. This is optional and depends on whether you want to mention the agent. Examples: active, open the window. Passive, let the window be opened. Active, please pass the salt. Passive, you are requested to pass the salt. Active, don't touch the cake. Passive, let the cake not be touched. Active, follow the instructions. Passive, you are advised to follow the instructions. Active, close the door quietly. Passive, let the door be closed quietly. Rules for conversion of interrogative sentences from active voice to passive voice. Converting interrogative sentences from the active voice to the passive voice involves changing the sentence structure and verb forms while maintaining the question format. Here are the rules for converting interrogative sentences. Determine whether the interrogative sentence is a yes or no question or a WH question. This will help you structure the sentence in the passive voice. In yes-no questions, move the helping verb to the beginning of the sentence to form the passive question. Use the appropriate auxiliary is, are, am, was, were, can, do, did, has, have, based on the tense of the original question. Example: active, is she cooking dinner? Passive, is dinner being cooked by her? In WH questions, where the question begins with a question word, who, what, where, when, why, which, keep the question word at the beginning of the passive question. Use the appropriate form of be, is, are, am, was, were, based on the tense of the original question. Example: active, what is he eating for lunch? Passive, what is being eaten by him for lunch? Please note that when the question words at the beginning of a sentence in the active voice is who, the sentence in the passive voice usually begins with by whom. Example: active, who wrote this book? Passive, by whom was this book written? Ensure that the sentence retains the question format, typically by keeping the question word or auxiliary verb at the beginning of the sentence. This helps indicate that it is a question. If you want to include the agent, the doer of the action, in the passive question, you can add by followed by the agent. This is optional and depends on whether you want to specify who is performing the action. Ensure that the be verb agrees in tense with the original question and that the subject auxiliary verb agreement is maintained. Knowledge gained. When the subject of a sentence performs the action of the verb actively, the verb is said to be in the active voice. The active voice is used most of the time in day-to-day conversation as well as writing. In the active voice, the object receives the action of the verb. The passive voice is not normally used in general conversation or writing. In this voice, the subject receives the action of the verb. The object of a sentence in the active voice becomes the subject of the sentence in the passive voice. The main verb in a sentence in the passive voice is always in its past participle form, and the auxiliary verb is always a be verb. Usually, we use by to introduce the passive object. The passive voice is used in a sentence when the purpose is to make the active object more important or when the active or direct subject is not clearly known.